Black woman CEO told to wait outside. The humiliation burned through her veins as she stood in the doorway of her own airport lounge. The staff had no idea they were disrespecting the very woman who signed their paychecks. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Rain hammered the windows of Westchester County Airport as Simone Carter, fresh from closing a billion-dollar deal in London, strode toward her company's private lounge. Her heels clicked on the wet floor, her designer suit still impeccable despite the 20-hour journey. The exhaustion from the transatlantic flight had begun to set in, but the thought of resting in Carter Air's exclusive lounge before the final leg home kept her moving forward. She'd designed the space herself, plush chairs, ambient lighting, and top-shelf refreshments for her executives and premium clients. As she approached the entrance, the attendant, a thin man with slicked-back hair who'd been hired during her absence, looked up from his computer. His eyes flicked over her, taking in her dark skin, her braided hair, her expensive but understated jewelry. Without checking any credentials, he raised his hand in a stopping motion. "Wait outside," he said, voice clipped and dismissive. "You have no business here." Simone blinked, momentarily stunned. "Excuse me. This is a private lounge," he continued. Louder now, as if volume would compensate for her presumed lack of understanding. "For authorized personnel only." The words hung in the air between them. Simone felt heat rise to her face as several heads turned to witness her humiliation. She reached for her identification, but the attendant had already returned his attention to the computer, dismissing her entirely. Through the glass doors, she watched as a white couple approached. The attendant immediately stood, smiling broadly as he ushered them in with a deferential nod. "Welcome to Carter Air, Mr. and Mrs. Davidson. May I offer you something to drink?" The injustice of it settled in her chest like a weight. This wasn't the first time she'd been judged by her appearance rather than her position, but never at her own company, never in a space that bore her name. She observed silently as 3 more passengers, all white, were welcomed without question. When she finally approached again, ID in hand, the attendant examined her credentials with exaggerated scrutiny, his lips pursed in suspicion. "I'll need to verify this," he said, reaching for the phone. Simone stood perfectly still, her expression carefully composed. But beneath her calm exterior, something had shifted. The storm that had been building inside her wasn't just anger, it was resolution. As CEO of Carter Air, she had built her company on principles of excellence and respect. What she was witnessing wasn't just a personal slight. It was a fundamental failure of leadership that she would not allow to stand. Simone stood outside the exclusive Platinum Lounge, rain pelting her $5,000 Burberry coat like tiny bullets. The downpour seemed to mirror her internal storm as she watched through the glass doors while Jason, the lounge manager, performed his little power play. She had faced discrimination before, subtle glances, surprised reactions when she introduced herself as CEO, but never this blatant disrespect at her own company's partner establishment. "Just need to verify your credentials, ma'am," he had said with that smirk that suggested he already knew the outcome. The same smirk he'd worn when he'd told her to wait outside while he sorted things out. Through the glass, Simone watched as 3 white executives entered, flashed their cards, and were welcomed with warm smiles and handshakes. No verification, no waiting in the rain, just immediate acceptance and respect. 25 minutes. That's how long she stood there, her silk blouse now clinging uncomfortably beneath her soaked coat, her carefully styled hair ruined. 25 minutes of watching others breeze past while she, Simone Jenkins, Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Global, a company that owned 40% of this very building, was treated like an imposter. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant confirming tomorrow's board meeting. Simone stared at the screen, a realization dawning that made her straighten her shoulders despite the rain. This wasn't just about her personal humiliation. This was symptomatic of something deeper, a culture that had been allowed to fester within the partner companies Meridian worked with. Jason appeared at the door again, holding her platinum card between two fingers as if it might be contaminated. "Sorry for the inconvenience," he said without a hint of sincerity. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding." Simone took her card, her mind already racing ahead. She had built Meridian from nothing, navigating a world that constantly underestimated her. She had overcome obstacles far greater than one prejudiced manager. But now she saw clearly. This wasn't just an isolated incident. This was evidence of a systemic problem that needed addressing from the top down. As she finally stepped into the warm, dry lounge, Simone made a decision. By this time tomorrow, things would change, not just for her, but for everyone. Jason finally returned, cracking the door open just enough to peer at her through the gap. "Fine, you can come in, only because it's raining," he said, his voice laced with warning. "But we'll be watching you closely. Don't touch anything." He stepped aside reluctantly, making it clear her presence was merely tolerated, not welcomed. Simone entered the building, water dripping from her coat and forming small puddles around her designer heels. The warmth of the lobby should have been comforting after standing in the downpour, but the chill of the staff's reception was palpable. No one offered her a towel, or even acknowledged her presence beyond suspicious glances. Two receptionists whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting toward her before quickly looking away when she caught them staring. A young man carrying a stack of files deliberately changed direction to avoid walking past her. The message was clear. She was an intruder, not the company's new owner. Simone made her way to the plush waiting lounge, choosing a seat with a clear view of the entire reception area. She removed her wet coat and placed it carefully beside her, watching as a staff member grimaced at the thought of having to clean up after her. Her phone buzzed with messages from her assistant asking for updates, but Simone decided to wait. This moment called for strategic patience. Though every fiber of her being wanted to pull out her credentials and watch their faces fall in shock, Simone resolved not to act on her authority, yet there was more to learn here, more to understand about the culture she was about to transform. She would let them reveal their true colors, give them enough rope to hang themselves professionally. She observed as employees passed by, some openly staring, others pretending not to notice her. Their whispered conversations weren't quite quiet enough. Fragments like, "Doesn't look like she belongs here," and "Probably lost," reached her ears. Simone mentally noted each face, each comment, each microaggression. This wasn't just about one rude doorman anymore. Simone was determined to expose just how deep the prejudice ran in this organization. She settled back in her chair, projecting an air of calm despite her damp clothes and the growing indignation in her chest. The company had no idea what was coming. A reckoning that would shake its very foundation. As she settled into a corner chair, Simone observed the room, masking her boiling anger behind a serene expression. The plush leather seat felt cold and unwelcoming, much like the stairs directed her way. She could hear Jason and his management team muttering about her presence, their voices just low enough that she couldn't make out the exact words, but loud enough that she knew they were discussing her. Their suspicion was barely concealed in sidelong glances and stiff postures as they huddled together near the refreshment table. "Mia, keep an eye on her. Will you?" Jason's voice carried across the room as he assigned a young attendant to monitor Simone's movements. "Make sure she doesn't wander off anywhere sensitive." Mia, a recent hire with bright eyes and a nervous demeanor, nodded reluctantly. As she approached Simone with a forced smile and offered a glass of water, her eyes flickered with unmistakable guilt. Simone recognized the look immediately. Mia knew this treatment was wrong, but fear silenced any protest she might have voiced. The young woman hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable with her assigned role as sentinel. "Is there anything else I can get you?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, thank you," Simone replied evenly, maintaining her composed facade. "I'm quite comfortable just waiting." The lounge fell into an uncomfortable hush that pressed in on Simone from all sides. The elegant space, with its modern art pieces she had personally selected, the custom furniture she had approved, even the specific shade of blue on the walls she had chosen after weeks of deliberation, now made her feel like an intruder. This was a world she had built from scratch, pouring her vision, sweat, and determination into every detail. Yet here she sat, treated like an unwelcome stranger. Simone took a slow, deliberate sip of water, using the moment to study the executives who had forgotten, or perhaps never truly believed, that she was their boss. She noticed how they clustered together, occasionally throwing glances her way before returning to their whispered conversation. Their body language spoke volumes, arms crossed defensively, shoulders tensed, faces set in expressions of annoyance and suspicion. The irony wasn't lost on her. 5 years ago, when she'd secured the funding to launch this company, people had doubted her ability to succeed. Now that she had built it into an industry leader, they doubted her right to lead it. Simone checked her watch. 15 minutes had passed since she'd been asked to wait outside. 15 minutes of calculated disrespect. 15 minutes too many. Jason approached again, his voice just above a whisper. "Any trouble, we'll call security. You've been warned." His breath smelled of coffee and contempt as he leaned in closer than necessary. Simone didn't flinch, meeting his gaze with the same steady calm she'd used in countless boardrooms where she was the only black face present. Her response was measured but pointed. "Do you treat all your guests this way, or just the ones who look like me?" The question hung between them like a gauntlet thrown. He recoiled slightly, his lips tightening into a thin line. Something flickered across his face. Perhaps recognition, perhaps shame, but it vanished quickly behind a mask of cold professionalism. "I'm simply following protocol, ma'am," he replied, emphasizing the last word in a way that stripped it of any respect. He straightened his tie, refusing to meet her eyes now, as if eye contact might force him to acknowledge her humanity. Simone noted how the other staff members watched from a distance, their expressions ranging from uncomfortable to curiously detached. Not one intervened. She'd seen this tableau before, the silent witnesses, the plausible deniability, the collective agreement to pretend nothing was happening. The exchange hung in the air between them, a bitter reminder that even power, education and achievement could be rendered invisible by prejudice. Around them, the lobby continued its morning rhythm. Phones rang, elevators dinged, people walked past, some glancing curiously at the tension they sensed but couldn't name. Simone remained standing, her designer briefcase at her feet, her posture perfect. She'd learned long ago never to show how these moments affected her, not publicly at least. Later, perhaps she would process this in private, but now she had a meeting to attend and a company to evaluate, and increasingly she had decisions to make about its future and the people who currently managed it. The jet gleamed on the tarmac, a sleek silver and white testament to everything Simone had built from nothing. She walked toward it with her head high, though each step felt heavier than the last. The afternoon sky had turned a dull grey, matching her mood as she approached what should have been her sanctuary in the sky. As Simone neared the aircraft stairs, a slim blonde woman in a crisp uniform stepped directly into her path. Her name tag read Emma, and her lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Excuse me," Simone said, reaching for the boarding documents in her purse. Emma raised one manicured hand. "Sorry, this is a private flight, passengers only." Her voice carried the particular tone Simone had heard countless times, polite words wrapped around an unmistakable sneer. "I understand that. I'm Simone Carter. The..." "Ma'am, I need you to step aside." Emma cut her off, raising her voice slightly as though speaking to someone hard of hearing. "The passengers will be arriving shortly, and you're blocking the entrance." Her eyes flicked over Simone's designer suit and handcrafted leather briefcase with open skepticism, as if they must be counterfeits. Simone took a deep breath and pulled out her identification and ownership papers. "As I was saying, I'm Simone Carter, CEO of Horizon Innovations. This is my aircraft." Emma barely glanced at the documents. "Anyone can print papers. Please wait over there while I verify this with security." She gestured dismissively toward a bench 20 yards away, where service personnel typically waited. The humiliation burned hot in Simone's chest. After everything she'd already endured today, this felt like the universe piling on. She'd built a billion-dollar company from the ground up, yet still had to prove she belonged in spaces she owned. The irony might have been laughable if it weren't so exhausting. Behind Emma, Simone could see other flight crew members watching the exchange through the cabin windows, their faces a mixture of curiosity and judgment. One was already on a phone, likely calling someone to handle the situation. Simone squared her shoulders. The day had already shown her exactly what she needed to know about this company's culture. This final indignity was simply confirmation of what required fixing and who needed to go. Simone took a deep breath, steadying herself as she locked eyes with Emma. The terminal bustled around them, but in this moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. "I am a passenger," Simone explained, her voice calm but firm. "Please check my boarding pass." She extended the document toward Emma, who made no move to take it. Instead, Emma's lips curled into a smirk as she deliberately raised her voice, ensuring everyone in the vicinity could hear. "Do you know how much this flight costs? People like you can't afford this." The words hung in the air, their implication unmistakable. Simone glanced around, noticing how the other airline staff suddenly found their computer screens fascinating, how passengers pretended to be absorbed in their phones. No one intervened, no one spoke up. Their silence was a weight pressing down on her shoulders, a familiar burden she'd carried too many times before. Her heart pounded against her ribcage, but years of navigating rooms, where she was the only black face, had taught her to never show weakness. Never give them the satisfaction of seeing you rattled. Never fulfill their expectations of the angry black woman. She straightened her designer blazer, the same one she'd worn to close a 7-figure deal last week, and met Emma's gaze without flinching. "Check your manifest," Simone repeated, her patience wearing dangerously thin. She wasn't asking anymore. It was a command. The boarding pass remained extended between them like a challenge. "My name is Simone Washington. I'm in seat 3A, first class. You'll find me there, right at the top of your list." Emma's expression flickered, perhaps finally registering that this confrontation might not end as she expected. But instead of backing down, she doubled down, crossing her arms and shifting her weight to one hip in a posture of defiance. "I don't need to check anything," Emma said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I know who belongs in first class and who doesn't." The terminal continued its rhythmic hum of announcements and rolling suitcases, but for Simone, everything narrowed to this moment, this woman, this all-too-familiar battle. She'd fought versions of this fight her entire career, proving her worth, justifying her presence, defending her right to occupy spaces others believed she had no business entering. But today felt different. Today, something inside her had reached its breaking point. Emma, emboldened by the lack of intervention from her colleagues, reached for the phone on the reception desk. "I'm calling security," she announced loudly, her voice carrying across the now silent lobby. "This woman is clearly delusional and becoming disruptive." Jason rushed to her side. Nodding vigorously in agreement, they stood shoulder to shoulder, a united front of disdain and dismissal. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises immediately," Jason said, his voice dripping with false professionalism. "We've humored this charade long enough." He gestured toward the exit doors with an exaggerated sweep of his arm, as if directing traffic. Simone remained perfectly still, her expression unreadable. The room seemed to hold its breath. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable undercurrent of steel. "I'm asking you one last time. Verify my name on the manifest," she said, each word precise and measured. "It will take 30 seconds of your time." Jason's laugh was cruel and dismissive. He picked up the documents Simone had placed on the counter earlier, waving them in the air with theatrical contempt. "Anyone could fake these," he scoffed, not bothering to examine them closely. "Under a decent printer and some official letterhead doesn't make you our CEO." A few staff members offered awkward chuckles, the kind of nervous laughter that emerges when people sense they might be witnessing something inappropriate, but lack the courage to intervene. Yet beneath that scattered laughter, a palpable unease had begun to spread through the room. A few employees exchanged worried glances. One woman in accounting bit her lower lip, her eyes darting between Simone and the management team. Emma's finger hovered over the security button, but something in Simone's unwavering composure made her hesitate. There was a certainty in the woman's stance, a quiet confidence that didn't align with Emma's mental image of an imposter or troublemaker. For the first time since the confrontation began, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. Unfazed, Simone pulled out her phone, dialing a direct line to her COO, Marcus Carter. The room fell silent as she spoke with unwavering authority. "Marcus, I need the executive team at Westchester now. We have a serious situation." Her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable weight that made several employees exchange nervous glances. "Yes, immediately. And bring the HR director with you." She ended the call and slipped her phone back into her designer handbag, her expression unreadable. Emma shifted uncomfortably, tugging at her collar as beads of sweat formed on her forehead. For the first time since Simone had walked in, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Emma's face. She leaned toward Jason, whispering something that made his smug smile falter slightly. The confidence that had radiated from them moments ago was beginning to crack like thin ice under pressure. Whispers rippled through the staff gathered in the lobby. "Is that really her?" one receptionist murmured to another. "The Simone Richardson, the CEO?" The atmosphere in the room had transformed completely, charged with tension and the dawning realization that something momentous was unfolding before their eyes. Jason cleared his throat, attempting to regain his composure. "Look, there must be some misunderstanding. I'm sure we can sort this out like professionals." His voice had lost its earlier condescension, replaced by a nervous tremor he couldn't quite hide. Emma nodded quickly. Too quickly. "Absolutely. Perhaps we got off on the wrong foot. Why don't we move this conversation to my office?" Her smile was strained, her eyes darting between Simone and the main entrance, as if calculating how long it would take for the executive team to arrive. But Simone simply checked her watch, a subtle yet powerful gesture that communicated she was now in control of the timeline. "That won't be necessary, Emma. We'll wait right here." She settled comfortably into one of the lobby chairs, crossing her legs with the poise of someone who knew exactly what would happen next. The doubt in Emma and Jason's eyes had transformed into something approaching fear, but they clung desperately to their arrogance like a life raft in increasingly turbulent waters. They still couldn't quite believe that their world was about to be turned upside down by the woman they had so casually dismissed. The rain pounded against the windows with increasing fury, matching the tension that had built to a breaking point inside the aircraft. Simone lowered her phone, her expression unreadable as she slipped it back into her designer handbag. The cabin had fallen eerily silent, save for the drumming of raindrops and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. Emma stood with her arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Go ahead. Call whoever you want," she taunted, though her voice carried a slight tremor that betrayed her confidence. "It won't change anything here." But behind Emma, Jason's previously cocky demeanor had begun to visibly crack. His eyes darted nervously between Simone and the exit, and beads of sweat formed along his hairline, despite the cabin's cool temperature. Whispers of "Carter" rippled through the first-class cabin like an electric current. One flight attendant leaned toward another, mouthing the name with wide eyes. A businessman in seat 3C suddenly became very interested in his shoes, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The name carried weight. Everyone knew it, and the realization of who they'd been dealing with was slowly dawning on the staff. In the cockpit, separated from the unfolding drama by a reinforced door, Captain Daniels and First Officer Lee exchanged nervous glances through their headsets. They'd caught fragments of the confrontation, enough to piece together that something unprecedented was happening. "This is going to be a mess," Captain Daniels muttered, running a hand through his greying hair. "Corporate's going to have our heads if this goes south." First Officer Lee nodded grimly, checking the weather radar as if it might offer some escape from the situation. "I've never seen anything like this in 15 years of flying," she whispered. Both pilots could sense the disaster brewing, one that had nothing to do with the storm outside and everything to do with the perfect storm of arrogance, prejudice, and misplaced power that was about to sweep through their careers like a hurricane. Whatever happened next would engulf them all. Lucas, the ground supervisor, stepped forward with a troubled expression. He'd been watching the entire exchange unfold with growing discomfort. "Maybe we should double-check her paperwork again," he suggested quietly to Emma and Jason, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise of the terminal. "Just to be certain." Emma's head snapped toward him, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "I know how to do my job, Lucas," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Step back and let me handle this. We don't need your input right now." The harshness of her tone made Lucas physically recoil. He retreated a few steps, his conscience waging a fierce battle with his fear. He'd been with the company for 11 years, longer than either Emma or Jason, and had a mortgage, 2 kids in college, and a wife recovering from surgery. He couldn't afford to lose this job, not now. Yet watching Simone being treated this way made his stomach turn. Across the room, Captain Daniels observed the scene with growing unease. As the highest-ranking flight crew member present, he had the authority to intervene. His training manual was clear about discrimination protocols, but Emma had connections with regional management, and he'd heard rumors about employees who crossed her suddenly finding themselves with reduced hours or transferred to less desirable routes. The captain shifted his weight from one foot to another, torn between professional duty and self-preservation. He'd be retiring in just 3 years. Did he really want to risk everything now? His silence felt heavy, suffocating. As he watched Simone's dignified restraint in the face of such blatant disrespect, he knew that not speaking up was its own form of complicity. Lucas caught the captain's eye across the room, a silent plea passing between them. But Captain Daniels merely adjusted his hat and looked away, his face a mask of practiced neutrality. Lucas felt something deflate inside him. If even the captain wouldn't stand up, what chance did a ground supervisor have? Simone's gaze swept the group, her disappointment clear. "In a few minutes, you'll see who really belongs here," she announced, her words slicing through the clamor. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the weight of her statement hanging in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Jason and Emma exchanged glances before scoffing, but for the first time, their laughter sounded hollow, a brittle sound that failed to mask their growing unease. The staff's silent stares betrayed their uncertainty as anxiety began to overtake arrogance. Jason tugged at his collar, a thin sheen of sweat forming on his forehead despite the room's cool temperature. "You can't possibly have the authority," Emma started, her voice lacking its usual confidence. She glanced around, seeking support from colleagues who suddenly seemed fascinated by the floor tiles or their fingernails. Simone merely smiled, not the warm, professional smile she'd offered when first entering the building, but something different, something that made even the most skeptical employees shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I've been observing this office for 3 weeks," Simone continued, her voice steady and controlled. "Not just today. I've seen how clients are treated differently based on appearance. I've witnessed the microaggressions, the dismissals, the casual discrimination that's become normalized here." The color drained from several faces as realization began to dawn. In the corner, Diane from accounting whispered something to her neighbor, who shushed her immediately. "Each of you has a digital footprint in this company," Simone continued, pulling out her tablet and scrolling through what appeared to be a detailed report. "Every email, every client interaction, every decision made in meetings, it's all documented." Jason's smirk finally faltered completely. "This is ridiculous. Who do you think—" The conference room door opened, and 3 people in corporate attire entered, carrying folders. One nodded respectfully to Simone before taking position beside her. "For those who haven't connected the dots yet," Simone said, straightening her shoulders, "I'm not just any consultant. I'm Simone Washington, the new CEO of Meridian Global. And these are representatives from our parent company's HR department." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Emma's face went ashen as she gripped the edge of the table. The whispers that had been building suddenly died, replaced by a silence so complete you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. "Now," Simone said, opening one of the folders handed to her, "let's discuss exactly who will still be employed here by the end of the day." Simone reached for her phone, her fingers steady despite the fury coursing through her veins. She scrolled through her contacts and pressed the name Ryan Hughes, Security. After 2 rings, a deep voice answered. "Ryan, this is Simone Blackwell. I need you to secure all camera footage from every floor in this building for the past hour. Lock it down immediately. No one touches it without my direct authorization." Her voice was measured but carried an unmistakable edge. "And I mean every camera, lobby, elevators, hallways, meeting rooms, everything." "Yes, ma'am. Right away," Ryan replied, clearly hearing the urgency in her tone. Emma's complexion had turned ashen as she listened to Simone's instructions. The confident smirk that had been plastered across her face just minutes ago was rapidly dissolving into something resembling fear. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, manicured nails now digging into her palms. "This isn't over," Simone stated, looking directly at Emma and Jason. Not by a long shot. The quiet certainty in her voice sent a visible chill through the room. This wasn't an emotional outburst or empty threat. This was a promise from someone with both the power and determination to follow through. Jason, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, suddenly seemed to lose his composure. His hands began to tremble noticeably as he reached for his water glass, causing small ripples to form across the surface as he lifted it to his lips. He took a long sip, trying to hide the shaking, but everyone in the room had already noticed. "The board will hear about this," Emma attempted, but her voice cracked halfway through. "Yes, they certainly will," Simone agreed, her calm only making Emma more nervous. "Along with the legal team, HR, and possibly the press if necessary." Jason set down his glass with a thud, water sloshing over the side. The consequences of their actions were finally becoming real to him, not just professional repercussions, but potential legal ones. His eyes darted to Emma, seeking reassurance she could no longer provide. "You can't possibly think," Emma started. "I don't think," Simone cut her off. "I know, and soon everyone else will too." She gathered her documents and stood up, her posture impeccable. "I suggest you both prepare your statements. You'll need them. Amid the chaos that had erupted in the office, a small figure approached Simone. It was Mia, the young attendant who had been present during the initial confrontation. Her hands were trembling slightly, but there was a newfound determination in her eyes as she stepped forward, ignoring the warning glances from her colleagues. "Ms. Reynolds," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm so sorry for what you've been through today. I should have done something when Mr. Patterson spoke to you that way. I saw everything and I just froze." Shame colored her cheeks, but she maintained eye contact with Simone. Simone's stern expression softened as she regarded the young woman. Here, in the midst of all this ugliness, was someone showing genuine remorse and accountability. It was refreshing after the cascade of excuses and deflections she'd been hearing all morning. "Thank you, Mia," Simone replied, her gratitude genuine. "Your courage matters. Even now, remember that." Emma, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward with a nervous laugh. "Mia, this isn't the time. You should return to your desk and—" Simone cut her off with a look that brooked no argument. The same commanding presence that had silenced the boardroom now focused entirely on Emma, who visibly wilted under the intensity of Simone's gaze. "Actually," Simone said, turning back to Mia, "this is exactly the time. Integrity doesn't wait for convenient moments, does it?" Mia straightened her shoulders, something new awakening in her expression. "No, ma'am, it doesn't." "Tell me, Mia," Simone continued, aware that several employees had stopped to listen. "How long have you worked here?" 3 years, Mia replied. "Started as an intern right out of college." Simone nodded thoughtfully. "And in those 3 years, was today an anomaly? Or have you seen patterns of this behavior?" Emma tried to interject again, but Simone raised a hand, not even bothering to look in her direction. The gesture was enough to silence her completely. Mia hesitated only briefly before answering. "It's not an anomaly, Ms. Reynolds. There's been a pattern. I've kept notes, actually. Documentation of incidents. I was planning to speak to HR, but—" She trailed off, the implication clear. But you were afraid," Simone finished for her. "I understand. Fear is a powerful silencer." She placed a gentle hand on Mia's shoulder. "That changes today." Captain Daniels felt a growing sense of dread in the pit of his stomach. The situation had spiraled completely out of control, and something about the confident demeanor of the woman they'd dismissed didn't sit right with him. Unable to bear the suspense any longer, he pulled up the company manifest on his tablet with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the document until they froze on the very first entry. Carter, owner, CEO. His face drained of all color. "Emma, Jason," he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. "You need to see this, now." They hurried over, still riding high on their perceived victory. Emma snatched the tablet from his hands, her smug smile vanishing instantly. Jason peered over her shoulder, his expression morphing from confusion to horror. That's impossible," Emma stammered, frantically scrolling through the document as if searching for evidence it was fabricated. "It's real," Captain Daniels confirmed grimly. "We just turned away Samantha Carter, our boss." The revelation spread through the staff like wildfire. Those who had witnessed the confrontation stood frozen in shock, while others who'd only heard snippets of the encounter began whispering frantically among themselves. One junior staff member actually dropped a stack of papers she'd been carrying, the sound of them scattering across the floor, punctuating the horrified silence. "Maybe we can fix this," Jason suggested desperately. "We could call her, explain there was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Emma hissed. "We accused her of lying about who she is. We told the CEO of our company to wait outside like some delivery person." The gravity of their actions was sinking in for everyone present. This wasn't just a case of poor customer service or mistaken identity. They had discriminated against the very person who signed their paychecks, the woman who had built this company from the ground up. "She's going to fire us all," someone whispered from the back of the room. Captain Daniels looked around at his team, seeing the same fear reflected in every face. The truth was undeniable and devastating, sweeping through the staff like a tidal wave, washing away their security and certainty. In one catastrophic moment of prejudice and arrogance, they had sealed their fates. The wailing of police sirens cut through the tense silence that had fallen over the lounge. Through the glass doors, everyone could see the flashing blue and red lights as 3 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. Marcus Carter emerged from the lead vehicle, his tall frame rigid with barely contained fury. Behind him followed a team of stern-faced individuals in business attire, the company's legal counsel, HR directors, and private security personnel. Marcus burst through the doors, his eyes immediately finding his sister. "Jasmine, are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle despite the storm brewing in his expression. When she nodded, he turned to face Emma and Jason, who had gone deathly pale. "Mr. Carter, we can explain," Emma began, her voice trembling. "Ms. Whitfield, save it." Marcus cut her off, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "My sister, the CEO of this company, calls me in distress because 2 mid-level managers refused to recognize her authority and subjected her to racial discrimination in her own building." Jason stepped forward, sweat beading on his forehead. "There was a misunderstanding. We thought she was just what?" Marcus thundered, causing several people to flinch. "Just a black woman who couldn't possibly own this company? Just someone you could disrespect and humiliate because of the color of her skin?" The room fell silent except for the shuffling of feet as the legal team positioned themselves around the perimeter. One of the HR directors was already taking notes, her face grim. "Your ignorance ends now," Marcus continued, his voice level but filled with steel. "My sister and I built this company from nothing. While you were climbing your little corporate ladder, she was revolutionizing this industry. And today, you decided her skin color was more important than her credentials." Emma's eyes darted around the room, looking for support but finding none. The other employees kept their gazes averted, some with expressions of shame, others with barely concealed satisfaction at seeing the notorious duo finally facing consequences. "Security will escort you to your desks to collect personal belongings," Marcus stated flatly. "Our legal team will explain the terms of your immediate termination. And I suggest you both retain counsel. Discrimination lawsuits can be quite expensive. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from." Marcus stood his ground as Captain Daniels shifted uncomfortably. "I understand I made an error in judgment," the security chief admitted, his voice barely audible in the now silent executive lounge. "An error?" Marcus pressed, his tone razor-sharp. "You watched your staff discriminate against our CEO and did nothing. That's not an error, that's complicity." The security team stood in a rigid line as staff members from the lounge were brought in one by one to explain their actions. The young hostess who had initially approached Simone was trembling. "I was just following what I was taught during training," she explained, tears welling in her eyes. "We were told to be extra vigilant about people who didn't look like they belonged." "And who taught you that?" Simone asked, her voice steady despite the anger churning inside her. "Mr. Whitman from operations," she replied. "He said it came from upper management." Simone exchanged glances with Marcus, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. The discrimination wasn't just random acts by individuals, it was systematic, encouraged, perhaps even mandated. As each staff member spoke, a pattern emerged. A culture of exclusion had been carefully cultivated, with unwritten rules about who deserved respect and who didn't. Some employees appeared genuinely remorseful, others seemed merely afraid of consequences. "You should have spoken up," Marcus told Daniels again. "Every single one of you should have spoken up when you saw something wrong." Simone felt a powerful clarity washing over her. This wasn't just about one humiliating incident anymore. This was about rooting out a poison that had infected her company while she'd been focused on growth and innovation. "I want detailed reports from everyone by tomorrow morning," she instructed. "Every incident, every unofficial policy, every conversation where discrimination was encouraged. Names, dates, specifics." The security team sealed off the lounge as evidence was collected: emails, training materials, security footage. What had begun as a personal affront was transforming into something much larger, a complete dismantling of the toxic culture that had taken root. As Simone watched the proceedings, she felt a surge of resolve strengthening her spine. The reckoning had begun, not just for the individuals who had wronged her today, but for an entire system that had been allowed to fester under her watch. This ends now, she thought, her mind already mapping out the sweeping changes to come. The company she'd built would be transformed or torn down and rebuilt from its foundation. Inside the luxury cabin of her private jet, Simone's calm demeanor belied the storm brewing within her. She sat across from Emma and Jason, who shifted uncomfortably in their leather seats. The engine hummed softly in the background as the three of them faced each other in a moment of reckoning. "I want to understand something," Simone began, her voice measured. "What exactly made you think I was unworthy of boarding my own plane? What was it about me that triggered such disrespect?" Emma cleared her throat. "It was simply protocol, Ms. Richardson. We have procedures for—" "For what?" Simone interrupted. "For black women in business attire carrying premium luggage, or just for black women in general?" Emma's face flushed crimson. "That's not what I meant. We have security protocols for unverified—" "Unverified?" Simone's eyebrow arched. "My name is on the registration documents. My company pays every bill associated with this aircraft. My schedule was in your system." Each statement landed like a precise hammer blow. Jason attempted to intervene. There was clearly a misunderstanding, and on behalf of— "A misunderstanding implies an innocent error," Simone cut him off. "What happened today was a pattern, one I've experienced my entire career, and one I will no longer tolerate." The cabin fell silent. Outside the window, ground crew moved about their business, unaware of the seismic shift occurring within. "But Captain Daniels is suspended, effective immediately," Simone continued. "And as for both of you, your judgment has proven catastrophically poor." Emma's lips parted, but no words emerged. Jason stared at his hands. "The most disappointing part," Simone said, her voice softening slightly, "is that everyone else on this crew stood by and watched. Not one person stepped forward to correct this situation." The flight attendant who had been hovering near the galley lowered her eyes. "Our complicity through silence is still complicity," Simone concluded. "And in my company, that carries consequences." The weight of her words settled over the cabin like a heavy blanket. For the first time, they truly saw her, not as an intruder to be questioned, but as the formidable leader she had always been. Simone's verdict was swift and absolute, her voice carrying across the now silent conference room. "Emma Roberts, Jason Miller, you are terminated. Effective immediately." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "Captain Daniels, you're suspended pending a full investigation into your involvement." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of her authority filled every corner of the room. Emma's face drained of color. "You can't do this. I've been with this company for 11 years. And in those 11 years, Simone replied calmly, you've created a culture that's cost us talent, innovation, and basic human decency. Your time ended the moment you decided some employees were less deserving of respect than others." Jason attempted to interject, his voice trembling with indignation. "This is completely disproportionate. One misunderstanding and—" "This wasn't a misunderstanding," Simone cut him off. "The evidence spans months of documented incidents. The security footage from today was simply the final confirmation of a pattern we can no longer ignore." The remaining staff watched, chastened, as security arrived to escort Emma and Jason from the building. Captain Daniels surrendered his access badge without protest. His earlier bravado completely evaporated. Simone turned to address the remaining employees, her expression softening slightly but remaining resolute. "I want to be crystal clear about something. What happened today isn't just about punishment. It's a warning and a promise. A warning that this behavior will never be tolerated again, and a promise that Horizon Technologies will become a workplace where everyone is judged solely on their contributions and character." She paused, making eye contact with several staff members. "Let today be a lesson. Prejudice destroys not just people, but companies. It erodes trust, stifles innovation, and ultimately leads to failure. We're better than this, and from today forward, we will do better." A tentative hand raised from the back of the room. "What happens now?" Simone's expression shifted to one of determination. "Now, we rebuild, with transparency, accountability, and respect as our foundation. The road ahead won't be easy, but I believe in what we can become." As the meeting dispersed, the atmosphere had transformed. The shock remained. But something else was emerging, a cautious hope that perhaps this painful reckoning might lead to genuine change. As the rain finally stopped, sunlight pierced through the grey clouds, casting golden beams across the Carter Air headquarters. Simone stood at her office window, watching employees enter the building with a newfound spring in their steps. The company's transformation over the past 3 months had been nothing short of remarkable. With Marcus by her side as the new head of human resources, they had implemented sweeping reforms that were already changing the corporate culture at its core. "The bias training sessions are showing real results," Marcus said, joining her at the window. "People are actually talking about uncomfortable topics instead of pretending problems don't exist." Simone nodded. "The anonymous reporting system has already caught 2 incidents that would have been swept under the rug before. Their new AI-powered oversight program analyzed communication patterns and hiring decisions for unconscious bias, providing data that couldn't be ignored or explained away. In the boardroom down the hall, Mia was leading her first executive meeting as the newly promoted Vice President of Operations. Her courage in speaking up that fateful day had earned her not just a promotion, but the respect of the entire company. Even Lucas had found redemption of sorts. His belated honesty about what he'd witnessed over the years had proven valuable in identifying systemic issues, and his willingness to learn had made him an unexpected ally in the transformation. "You know," Simone said quietly, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they hadn't told me to wait outside that day." Marcus smiled. "Then you wouldn't have become a legend." And she had. The story of Simone Carter's courage had spread far beyond the walls of her company. Business schools were already developing case studies. Other CEOs called for advice. But Simone knew the true victory wasn't in her personal triumph over discrimination. It was in the revolution of justice and dignity she had sparked. As she walked through the halls of Carter Air that morning, greeting employees who now looked her in the eye with genuine respect, Simone understood something profound about power. Real power wasn't in titles or corner offices. It wasn't even in the ability to fire people who deserved it. Real power was the courage to change everything, to tear down broken systems and build something better in their place. And that was a power no one could ever take away from her again.